want to take these skills and break down a lot of the nuances that aren't immediately apparent when you're looking at the skill itself. And we're going to start with, of course, the best skill that the assassin has, and that's Death Sentry. Death Sentry is a trap. Traps can be laid 5 at a time. The reason why you want to know that is because if you ever cast a new trap, the oldest trap that is still around will be removed to be replaced until other traps are removed as well. The reason why that's so important is because if you have Shadow Warrior or Shadow Master out and they lay down a trap, this will actually replace the traps that you have put down. You have a total amount of 5 traps that can be out simultaneously, and this includes any of the traps here, as well as Blade Sentinel. So your Shadow Master and Shadow Warrior will replace your traps. So this is one of the reasons why quite often the skill gets completely ignored for any trap-based builds, because you don't want your damage traps to be replaced with their damage traps, since they use a lower level skill and their damage isn't going to benefit from their gear in any way or a plus to skills or anything like that. Death Sentry is interesting because it actually has 2 modes of doing damage. It has both the corpse explosion aspect of it as well as a lightning bolt aspect as well. So I wanted to show both of those working. Let's go out to the Frigid Highlands. But without having any bodies on the ground, if I were to cast my Death Sentry, you'll see that we're actually shooting lightning bolts at first, and then following that with the corpse explosion ability. Unless there is a body on the ground, as long as the target is within the radius or awareness radius of your Death Sentry, you'll actually shoot a lightning bolt. And that radius is a static 10 2/3 yards. So if you're looking at your character from the center of the screen, 10 yards is somewhere around here. So if a monster is outside of this radius, it will not shoot a lightning bolt at it. If there is a body or the monster walks in radius, it will begin to fire off its death explosion. And then again, if there are no bodies, it will shoot its lightning bolt. The problem with it shooting its lightning bolt is that your Death Sentry has a limited number of shots. You'll see that as per the synergy bonus, it will shoot an additional time for every 3 skill points you put into Fire Blast. So it has 5 shots initially, and then with a max synergy Fire Blast, you're going to gain an additional 6 shots, so a total of 11 shots. To very quickly finish off the first aspect of Death Sentry, which is this lightning bolt that it fires off, which is inarguably the weakest part of the skill, since the lightning damage is pretty small in comparison to just about everything. The major facet of Death Sentry is the corpse explosion. So there's a couple things to understand about corpse explosion and how it works. 1, corpse explosion is going to take a percentage of the monster's base life, and this damage doesn't scale with player settings. So what I mean by that is whenever you increase a player setting, you're also increasing the monster's total life pool by a multiplier. So at player's 8 settings, the monster has an additional 350% maximum life. This skill is only looking at the monster's base life, so not taking into account any of the bonuses from player settings. That's why Corpse Explosion tends to become less powerful in higher player settings, because dealing 100% of a monster's life when they have a total of 450% of their base life to begin with isn't as devastating as being able to do that much damage on lower player settings. The damage of Corpse Explosion is 1/2 fire and 1/2 physical, and the radius of that damage is actually different for both damage types. So the physical damage component actually has a 1 yard smaller radius than the fire damage component. So your physical damage is going to be in a slightly smaller proximity, and the fire damage is going to be in a slightly larger vicinity. When talking about this damage, the monster's resistances to that damage is calculated after the attack's damage. So how does that damage exactly get calculated? Well, first you take the random roll of whatever percentage of the monster's base life is going to be used for the calculation, and then you take 1/2 of that, literally 50% of that, and this will be applied in its physical damage radius, and then the other 50% will be increased in its fire damage radius. Now, each one of these types of damage is going to check the monster's resistances. So if the monster has 50% physical damage reduction, but no fire damage reduction, you're effectively doing 3/4 of your total damage, because half of it is fire, which has no resistance to it, and the other half is again cut in half, because the monster is going to resist half of your total physical damage. That leaves you with 3/4 of your total damage. Considering the type of resistance reduction options available to you, what's the strongest? Well, the reason why your necromancer is going to be using amplified damage is because this has the largest total multiplicative effect. It reduces a monster's physical damage reduction by 100%, which is going to be stronger than any elemental damage reduction that they're going to have. Because you are an assassin, none of your +2 elemental skill damage or minus enemy resistance on your gear is actually going to affect the damage from your traps. Even though there's nothing in the game to really show you this, traps are not considered to be the assassin herself doing something. So unless you have an external skill like Conviction Aura or somebody else's applied amplified damage or Decrepify, there's no way for you to really boost this damage other than walking around with something like a lower resist wand at lower level, or having, again, Infinity or Plague to cast lower resist at higher gear levels. As far as using Death Sentry appropriately or the best way to do it, most often you're going to be using this in line with one of your other skills, so something like your Lightning Sentry. Putting your Lightning Sentry stacked about 3 down right on the same point is going to have them all shoot their lightning bolts at the same target most often, and this will lead to a body being created as soon as possible. And if your lightning traps are somewhere around here to be engaging with monsters, you're going to want to have your Death Sentry somewhere behind you. This will mean that the monsters are far enough outside the range that you're not going to be shooting lightning bolts at them, but the moment that their body drops into the ground, they'll pop. And since the pop is localized on the monster's radius, you don't have to be worried. You'll see monsters actually dying to our corpse explosions from all the way back there. Since they were far enough out of range, the lightning bolts aren't shooting, but they're still within the total radius awareness of the trap itself, and this means that monsters are going to be exploding according to their maximum radius localized on their body, as opposed to the radius of the trap itself. Long story short, put Death Sentry behind you. Only about 1 or 2 are really needed to get the domino effect going, and they will explode on top of the monsters, and then that will ripple out from them. If you are so far past your traps that you can no longer see them on screen, relocate them again and just keep this in mind. Again, you're putting your primary damage sentry up closer to the monster, and then putting your Death Sentry slightly behind you, so that they're only ever using Corpse Explosion and not using their lightning attack. One last thing about Death Sentry to keep in mind is that since it has a dual damage effect, you are able to deal damage to monsters that are immune to one or the other type. So if you have a monster that's immune to fire but not immune to physical, the physical damage radius blast will still hit them, even though the fire damage won't apply to them, or will be completely mitigated by their resistances. Likewise, if you have a monster that's immune to physical but not to fire, having your Corpse Explosion go off will apply the fire damage without applying the physical damage. While you're going to be losing out on 50% of your damage in total, again, the physical damage can be amped up by applying something like Decrepify or Amp Damage, and the fire damage could be amped up by having either Infinity or lower res available. So in most cases, once you have that Infinity going, you're going to be dealing near 100% damage to any monster that's just immune to one type, and on anything that isn't immune to both types, you're going to be dealing a massive amount of damage more than what the tooltip will say about the monster's current life total. I hope that this helps to explain how Death Sentry works as a skill, and all the things that you don't necessarily get from the tooltip when trying to understand all the different nuances that go into it. If you haven't already, consider subscribing to the channel and liking this video. It helps me out a ton. We're on a massive push up to 5,000 subscribers, and we are super close. So if you haven't already, I would really appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching. Again, I very much appreciate you, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.